Officer Daniel Carter had seen a lot in his 10 years on the force. He had chased down criminals, broken up violent disputes, and even pulled people from burning cars. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had ever sent a chill down his spine quite like this. It was a quiet evening, the kind where the city seemed almost peaceful. The radio in his squad car crackled as he took a sip of lukewarm coffee. Just as he was about to check in with dispatch, his eyes landed on a small figure sitting alone on a park bench under a flickering streetlight. A boy. He looked no older than 6 or 7, his tiny body wrapped in an oversized hoodie. His legs dangled off the bench, barely touching the ground. His face was pale, and his hands gripped the edge of the seat like he was afraid to let go. Something about him felt off. Daniel frowned. A kid this young shouldn't be out here alone, especially not at this hour. He set his coffee down, switched on his headlights, and stepped out of the car. The night air carried a hint of rain, and as he approached, he noticed the boy wasn't shivering. He wasn't even blinking much, just staring straight ahead like he was waiting for something. "Hey, buddy," Daniel said, keeping his voice gentle. "Are you lost?" The boy slowly turned his head. His eyes were big, dark, and filled with something Daniel couldn't quite place. It wasn't fear. It wasn't sadness. It was something deeper, something wrong. Daniel crouched beside him. "Where's your mom or dad? Do they know you're out here?" The boy didn't answer. He just sat there, his small fingers tightening around the fabric of his hoodie. Daniel's gut twisted. "It's okay," he reassured. "I'm a police officer. I can help you. What's your name?" The boy blinked, hesitated for a second, then leaned in close. His lips barely moved as he whispered something. Just 5 words. 5 words that made Daniel's blood run cold. His entire body stiffened. He felt his breath hitch, his pulse spike. For a brief second, the entire world around him seemed to shrink, the sounds of the city fading into a distant hum. He stood up quickly, pressing the radio on his shoulder. His voice came out sharper than he intended. "This is Officer Carter. I need backup. Now." The radio crackled in response. "Copy that, Carter. What's going on?" Daniel's eyes stayed locked on the boy. He couldn't look away, because he knew whatever had just come out of that child's mouth was not normal. It was a warning, a message, and if he didn't act fast, something very, very bad was about to happen. A tense silence stretched between Officer Carter and the little boy as his whispered words echoed in his mind. "He's watching us right now." Daniel's eyes darted around, scanning the dark park. The streetlight above them buzzed, casting long, eerie shadows across the empty benches and trees. His heart pounded as he slowly reached for his holster, his fingers grazing the cool metal of his gun. The radio crackled.
"Carter, backup is en route."
"ETA 5 minutes. What's the situation?" Daniel hesitated. He didn't even know what to say. A lost child whispering cryptic warnings? It sounded ridiculous. But something about the way the boy had spoken, so sure, so emotionless, unsettled him to his core. He swallowed hard and pressed the radio. "Stand by," he muttered, keeping his voice low. The boy was still staring at him. Not scared, not confused, just waiting. Daniel took a slow breath. "Who's watching us?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. The boy blinked. "The man." Daniel's stomach twisted. "What man?" The boy slowly lifted his hand and pointed toward the trees behind them. Daniel turned, his muscles tensed. The park was quiet, still, but something was off. The shadows seemed darker, stretched unnaturally long under the dim streetlights. His instincts screamed at him. Something was there, watching, waiting. He took a cautious step forward, his hand now fully gripping his gun. "Stay here," he told the boy firmly. The child didn't argue. He just sat there, silent. Daniel moved toward the trees, his heartbeat loud in his ears. The further he walked, the more the air seemed to change. It was subtle at first, but then it became unmistakable. The temperature had dropped. A sharp, biting cold wrapped around him like invisible fingers. His breath came out in thin, misty clouds. That wasn't normal. Not in the middle of a warm night. His fingers tightened around his gun as he reached the tree line. His eyes darted between the trunks, searching. A part of him hoped he'd find nothing. Maybe the kid was just scared, imagining things. Maybe, and then he saw it. The figure, standing just beyond the trees. Still, motionless, watching. Daniel's blood turned to ice. The man, if he even was a man, was unnaturally tall, his limbs just slightly too long, his posture eerily stiff. His face was obscured by the shadows, but Daniel could feel his gaze burning into him. The officer instinctively reached for his radio. "This is Carter, I have a visual on a suspect." Standing at the tree line, requesting immediate. He never finished his sentence, because in the blink of an eye the figure moved. Not walked, moved. 1 second he was at the tree line and the next, he was closer, right at the edge of the shadows. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. His instincts screamed run, but his feet felt frozen in place. The air was thicker now, pressing against his chest, making it harder to breathe. And then, a voice, low, distorted, impossible to place. "Leave the boy." Daniel's hands shook as he aimed his gun. "Stay where you are," he barked, his training kicking in. The figure didn't move, but something about the air changed again. It was smiling. Daniel knew one thing for sure now. This wasn't a normal man. And the boy, he knew exactly what this thing was. Daniel's grip on his gun tightened as his pulse hammered in his ears. The figure at the tree line didn't move, yet the suffocating presence pressing against his chest only grew stronger. Behind him, the little boy remained seated on the bench, eerily calm. It was as if he had seen this before, as if he knew what was coming. The radio on Daniel's shoulder crackled again. "Carter, what's going on? Your backup is almost there." Daniel swallowed hard. His instincts screamed at him to grab the kid and run. But deep down, he knew whatever this thing was, it wouldn't let them leave that easily. "I said, stay where you are," he barked at the figure. The response was immediate. The shadows shifted. 1 second, the figure stood just beyond the trees. The next, it was gone. Daniel's breath hitched. His eyes darted wildly, scanning the park. The night was still. Too still. Where did it go? Then, from behind him, a whisper. "Officer." Daniel spun around, gun raised. Nothing. The boy still sat on the bench, but this time he was smiling. A slow, knowing smile. Daniel took a step closer, his skin crawling. "Kid, we need to go. Now." The boy tilted his head. "It's too late." A gust of freezing wind rushed past Daniel, and suddenly, the streetlight above them flickered and died. Darkness swallowed them whole. For the first time in his life, Officer Carter felt true terror. Then, a hand, cold, skeletal, wrapping around his wrist. His scream never made it past his throat. Daniel's body locked up as the ice-cold grip tightened around his wrist. His breath came in short, panicked gasps. The darkness around him felt alive, pressing in, suffocating. He tried to pull away, but he couldn't move. The little boy was still sitting on the bench, his smile unchanging. "I told you," the boy said softly. "He's watching." A deep, inhuman whisper slithered through the darkness. "Leave the boy." Daniel struggled, his instincts screaming fight back. Run, do something, but his body wouldn't listen. His radio crackled violently, distant voices shouting his name, but they felt a million miles away. Then the sirens. Red and blue lights cut through the darkness as backup finally arrived. The moment the squad cars screeched to a stop, the grip on Daniel's wrist vanished. He stumbled backward, gasping. The streetlight above flickered back to life. The darkness was gone, and so was the figure. Other officers rushed toward him, shouting, asking questions. But Daniel couldn't answer. His shaking hands reached for the boy, but the bench was empty. The little boy was gone. A chill ran down Daniel's spine as he turned toward the trees, half expecting to see something still lurking in the shadows. But there was nothing, just the wind rustling the leaves. One of the officers grabbed his shoulder. "Carter, what the hell happened?" Daniel's throat was dry. He swallowed hard, staring at the empty bench. He had no answer. All he knew was this: that boy was never meant to be saved. And whatever had been watching them in the dark wasn't done yet. The end.